A very good evening. Speaker for today, CA Divya from Chennai. WRC Chairman, CA Manish Ghadia. RCM, CA Chintan Patel. Ahmedabad Branch Chairman, CA Harit Dhariwal. Vice Chairman, CA Bhishan Shah. Vikasa Chairman, CA Rahul Maliwal. Coordinator for today's session, CA Mohilji. Senior members and my dear friends. I know the weather is very good, but with Corona, compulsorily we have to attend the session, and I'm glad and congratulate all the participants to make it happen. So let's get started. Let's begin the session with ICI motto. Request Shehzad Bhai to play ICI motto and request each one of you to place their hand on their heart.
य एषः सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एषः सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते अस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
Thank you, Shehzad Bhai. Welcome back. Before we start this interesting session on auditing issues of non-corporate entities, we have esteemed guest and our own CA Manish Ghadia ji with us. I would request CA Manish ji to share few words.
Thank you very much, Anjali Madam. And really, Ahmedabad branch is doing fantastic work as far as our region is concerned. So really great work, the Fit 73, and apart from that, various other things built on food at doorstep and all that initiatives are really, really good, taking care of the members and students who are in COVID. So really great. Today's reason to have meeting on this topic. Apart from that, he is also working on a project that is Model Financial Statement for Non-Corporate Entities, which was published by WIRC last year and which was very much appreciated across India. And once they launched this accounting standard committee ASB approached WIRC saying that, sir, this changes has been made and we want you to revise the edition of this book. Immediately I called Chintan Bhai, sir, isko revise karna hai. Immediately he took up this project, and maybe in the next week, probably we will be in a position to launch this book. The target which was set by us was 1st June, but the way Chintan Bhai is working on this, I think before due date, he is going to release that book. So it's almost ready. Really great work by Chintan Bhai. And I should say that Ahmedabad branch has really given one diamond to the regional council in the name of Chintan Bhai. Apart from that, WIRC is doing various other good initiatives. I am not going to discuss that, but only two things I want to share is that this year we are celebrating, WIRC is celebrating 70th year of its foundation. So it's a great moment for all the members who are in the Western region. तो हमको इसको गर्व के साथ मनाने की जरूरत है. And second thing is, we all are going through a rough phase and we all are in pain because of COVID-19 across India. To take this in, keep this in mind, Institute has come out with a scheme from CABF that all the members or their family members who are not in a position to bear the cost of hospitalization due to COVID-19 and they do not have Mediclaim, then up to 1.5 lakh or whatever expenditure they have incurred, whichever is less, institute is going to reimburse the same from CABF. So those needy members should take this benefit. But at the same time, I also request, there are many members who are capable enough to contribute some amount in the CABF fund. Even a contribution of small amount of 1,000 is good enough to show your gesture that you are taking care of your needy professional brother and sister. So at this platform, I request all the participants and all the office bearer of Ahmedabad branch to contribute and encourage members to contribute amount to this CABF fund so that more and more members can take the benefit of this initiative what CABF is doing. So thank you very much, Ahmedabad branch, for giving me this opportunity. Over to you, Anjali madam.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you always supporting us, encouraging us. Me and chairman were just discussing 2 days before. The calendar which you have made for May and June is commendable, and tremendous planning and execution is required. We are really fortunate that we belong to WRC, and under your leadership, I'm sure Ahmedabad branch is going to rock. For 70th year celebration, sir, whatever direction, jo aadesh ho, aapka jo order ho, bata dena, we would be more than fortunate. And I would request all the members to take advantage of the CABF fund. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time, sir. Taking the session ahead, I would now request our Diamond Regional Council member, CA Chintan Patel, to share a few words.
Thank you so much, Anjali Ben, for giving me the opportunity to share my views. And it's really a pride pleasure to have the session on non-company accounting standards. Because this is a topic which has been neglected for so many years. Always people believe that the account standards are only for companies, and for non-companies like individuals, partnership firm, is it required? There's always a doubt on that. So I still remember my conversation with the chairman WRC, Manish Bhai. He on 30th March 2021, ICAI issued a notification of revision of level 1, 2, 3, and next day he called me. And he said that he wanted to ensure that every member of WRC region should be able to get understanding and awareness of these account standards. And that's why what we have planned, that let us have the campaign across the region, because the branches and study circles are represented in the region. So through them, we can reach to each and every member of the region to see that the awareness of these account standards are being created. As we all are aware that Taxation Audit and Quality Review Board has been established by ICAI just a year back, and this board is going to really focus on the quality of the tax audit. Many chartered accountants believe that the account standards are not applicable in case when they're doing tax audit. However, that is the wrong thing. We need to ensure wherever we do attestations, we need to ensure the compliance with the accounting standard is must. The guidance note issued by ICAI also provides a specific paragraph, by paragraph 10.1 to 10.4, which provides guidance about the applicability and compulsory nature of these particular standards. So my humble request to each one of you, what is done primarily, that earlier there was a level 1, level 2, level 3. Now this has been further classified and simplified by way of matching the definitions with respect to MSME definitions of government. So MSME definition of government has been completely matched, and that's why the level 1, 2, 3, 4 is there now. However, there's a tabular representations of level 1, 2, 3, 4, and which gives you some clarifications about the some disclosure exemptions and relaxations provided in certain cases. So what is first needed? First, very critical that it is applicable to every entity. Even if you are proprietorship firm, partnership firm, or you are LLP, this accounting standard is mandated when you do attestation. That is what we want to have a clear understanding for all the members across region. Point number two, please look at your classifications, whether you're level 1, 2, 3, or 4. And as per level 1, 2, 3, 4, you need to ensure the relaxations in disclosure or not. And in case if you observe any non-compliance from the accounting standards, even though they are in compliance with the competition standards, because there are standards AS and ICDS. So there may be issues on AS and ICDS. So what is to be done here is that in case if you observe a non-compliance of keeping or maintaining records as per AS, it is a duty on a practicing CA that we need to brought down as attention or disclosure in our audit report. I think that is what I think we all want to ensure, that we have to be serious about these things. There are few standards like AS 15 employee benefits, AS 22 deferred tax. They have been ignored for more than 20 years. I think these are there since last 20 years. But still, we need to keep always a session to teach the AS 15, AS 22. And when you look at the disclosure, even for corporate clients, AS 15 is not completely being followed. So we need to really have awareness of these standards. So I congratulate the chairman of the branch and secretary, vice chairman, and the treasurer, Vikasa chairman, to have these kind of sessions where the members of Ahmedabad branch has got this knowledge. So with this brief word, my best wishes to all of you and all the members for creating this awareness, and also faculty Divya for agreeing to share her thoughts on these very, very important topics, which is generally ignored. So over to Anjali Ban. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chintan Bhai, for sharing such important updates with us. We congratulate you for bringing this unique topic and also bringing the unit faculty, CA Divya from Chennai. Thank you so much for always guiding and supporting us. Taking the session ahead, I would request now Chairman Ahmedabad branch to give opening remarks.
Thank you, Anjali Ben. I'll be a little quick now. So first of all, welcome Manish Ji Gadia, the chairman of WRC. I think I'll just tell one line for him that he has been instrumental in guiding us throughout our tenure so far, and I'm sure the way, the positivity and the enthusiasm with which he works at WRC inspires all of us. So thank you so much, sir, for always leading from the front. Chintan Bhai, our RCM, our Diamond RCM now, as he rightly mentioned, has always been there, and I'm sure the topics like these will never be ignored when Chintan Bhai is there. So be it auditing standards, accounting standards, all the things which we normally ignore, this year we are going to take it on a war footing. Thank you, Chintan Bhai, for that. Anjali Ben, Vishen Bhai, Rahul Bhai, and the faculty for the session, CA Divya from Chennai, and Mohil Saab, and all the participants. A very good evening to all of you. So I think about the topic, Chintan Bhai was the best person to speak, and he has already spoken. So I'm just going to speak about the branch activities in a nutshell. We have a wonderful DTWC. It's the Direct Tax Web Convention coming up next. We are on this Friday. So 21st, 22nd, 28th, and 29th. 4, you can say, kind of a weekend wherein we have the Direct Tax Web Convention, best faculties from the country to be delivering on the best topics. Girish Ahuja sir, Saurabh Soparkar sir, Sunil Talati sir, and all the other dignitaries will be joining in. So the schedule has already been sent to all of you. I request all of you to please join for the same. We have a wonderful women refresher course. I think it's one of its kind initiative wherein the women chartered accountants who wanted to get back to practice or job, it was a refresher course for them. We still have 8 or 9 sessions still pending on the valuation emerging areas which are there. So in case anybody wants to register, it is still on. Now coming to our, the one thing which you all are very passionate about is the Movement 73. I'm very happy to say that we have now more than 2,700 participants from 23 states and more than 220 cities of the country who have joined in the Fit India Movement 73 mission of Ahmedabad branch. And we have 72 branches who have joined us in this initiative. So I think for all the members, they keep on asking us whether we have not registered. You can still register. We have still 7 weeks to go. So, we have, like we say in Gujarati, Jagya Tyar Se Sawar. So, let us start from now. And we have 7 weeks to attain that fitness that we all really crave for. With this, I will not take much of the time. Thank you, Manish ji, again for joining in today. And thank you, Chintan Bhai, for your inspiring words. Over to you, Anjali Ben.
Thank you, Chairman, for important updates and guidance. I'm sure under your dynamic leadership and under the leadership of CA Manish ji, WRC will rock and Ahmedabad branch too. Thank you so much. Without taking much time, I first welcome CA Divya Chennai. I'm sure you will have a wonderful experience at Ahmedabad branch. And with this, I now request CA Rahul Maliwal to introduce the esteemed faculty, CA Divya ji from Chennai.
The chairman of the WRC, Manish sir, the chairman of Ahmedabad branch, Harit Bhai, our Diamond RCM,
I think he's facing some network issues.
Yes, connectivity issues there.
Yeah.
And even
yeah,
if you have introduction of CA Divya, then anyone can give, and we can
yes,
proceed.
Yes.
You have, or I can.
Can you share with me?
और हरीश भाई आप दे दीजिए.
Okay. So I'll be. I'm privileged to introduce the speaker for today's session. So CA Divya Abhishek. I think Rahul Bhai is back. I'll not take his role now. Rahul, you can please continue.
Sorry, there was some disturbance of the network. Now I'll just
Divya
introduce.
ji, there are so many people to introduce you.
So
that's the charm of Ahmedabad branch.
Just quickly introduce Divya ji. She is FCA, ACS, CMA, LLB, BCom, and she has also taken much more degrees. She has secured the All India rank in the CA and the CS both examination. She has completed her articleship from ENY in the field of audit and assurance. She has already delivered more than 800 lectures in the various conferences and seminars. So this was with regard to the academic. The most important attribute which I found in her profile is beyond that academic part, she is also a philanthropist. She is the presently the president of Inner Wheel Club of Madras, which playing the pivotal role in the upliftment and the education of the underprivileged girl. So, ma'am, this remind me the 2 lines of the John Wooden, which he has said that you can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never able to repay you. But I think all those underprivileged children will never able to repay you. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and delivering the session. Now, ma'am, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Rahul ji. As Anjali said, I think I should speak more often here to get such nice words and so much adulation from all of you. It is an absolute honor for me to share this dais with CA Manish D and CA Chintan ji. In fact, WARC has done such tremendous strides. I have been benefited from the kind of technology adaptation they've done, the publications that have come through. More often than not, I'll have multiple tabs of WARC open to just download the kind of publications that are coming. Thank you so much for that, CA Manish ji. Under your leadership, it is truly taken to the next level. I acknowledge the presence of CA Chintan ji. As already said, before I do any lecture, I go to YouTube and type his name to just understand what his views on accounting standards, auditing standards, and what not. What a multiple voracious reader and a brilliant speaker. In fact, whatever I wanted to say in 1.5 hours, he's already finished in 10 minutes at the start of the session. That is his candor and quality. Thank you so much for that. CA Harichi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this august crowd here at WARC. CA Anjali, thank you for keeping the session live, and Bhushan ji and Mohil for coordinating this session. Without further ado, I think let's dive right into the topic for today, which is going to be practical issues on audit of non-corporate. Now, friends, today's topic is extremely critical. Many CAs feel accounting standards is not for us. We are auditing only small companies. Accounting standards is something only for larger companies within Ind AS. We do not have to worry about it. But simply by being a member of the ICAI, we are bound by certain rules. So the person who's auditing Reliance by Mukesh Ambani or Birla, or the street vendor at the end of the street, you're just filing his return and giving a certificate for him to get a loan. You will come into the same bracket of following the accounting and auditing standards. So we may think it is not critical or important, but ICAI has made it abundantly clear on the value of these standards, which is why, let me reiterate, even though it has already been said before, the topic for today is critical for 2 primary reasons. One, ICAI has come out on its 400th conference on April 2021, wherein they very clearly disseminated the knowledge on what accounting standards, what issues we need to look into when we look at the non-company entities. Second, last 18 months, there is a quality review board which has been constituted. Earlier, we have had multiple review boards wherein turnover based on the extent to which it affects the stakeholders in a community, companies were picked up. So automatically, when you audit a smaller company or an individual or a sole proprietor, you are away and free of it. But today, the tremendous quality that is going into this review board, wherein they're not only going to look at the criteria, at random they're going to pick up, which means every client of yours can be picked up through this lot and can be checked into. Which is why today we need to understand what is applicable for us, whether this client is actually small, whether we need to look into further. And that is what I aim to cover through this session. Now, when we say non-corporate entity, you have a sole proprietor, you're a partnership firm, AOP, HUF, any entity which is not governed by the provision of Companies Act 2013 will fall into this bucket. Now, earlier I said small street vendor, you still have to follow the same guidelines. So when we see the screen, we immediately think, okay, this session is for smaller clientele. But friends, what if I were to tell you the Airport Authority of India that guides the largest airports in the globe, which does not follow Companies Act, but has a separate act with 50,000 crore turnover will also come into this bucket. So it's interesting to note, whatever standard you as an auditor, as a professional is going to follow for that street vendor, another auditor is also following for Airport Authority of India. That is how important and detailed the provisions have come out today for non-corporate entity. And as I rightly said by the dignitaries, these provisions are very, very important, and the awareness of it, the disseminating of knowledge to fellow professionals is even more important. The numbers speak for itself, friends. What you see on the screen is January 2021, the Income Tax Department released a report where it said, now we are aware, any entity which is governed by a statutory law has to file Form 3CA. All the other entities which do not have a specific law but only need to file as per the provisions of Income Tax Act forms under Form 3CB. When you see the numbers, it's staggering. For those who form 3CA, it is only 250,000 entities. For those who follow Form 3CB, it's 25,37,000, almost 10 times. So we might think it is a small company. I do not need to follow. I might not be reviewed. But when you see the numbers, India culturally has family enterprises, has HUF, has firms, has sole proprietors who might be turning high revenue, thereby becoming the chunk of the focus of the government. So increasingly, all these changes that we see through, all these amendments that are coming in, show us that increasingly the government is focusing on this chunk of 25,37,000 and doesn't just stop there. These numbers are only for companies that have tax audit. There are multitudes of entities which do not have tax audit, which still have extremely high repercussions and turnovers. In fact, when the finance minister gave a speech and gave some relief for entities which have less than 250 crore turnover, she said over 96% of entities in India will benefit from it. So while we have focused amply on the 4% on the company, on the tax audit cases, this 96% is going to be a game changer for us, friends. And with that, let me start for today's session. So our first question is going to be, okay, you have told me what a non-corporate entity is. Now, what is the complaints I have to be aware of? You are saying accounting standards. What is the complaints I need to be aware of? The first and foremost is going to be in the area of accounting and auditing standards. We are going to deliberate. Now, in the case of a tax audit company, you file the return, you issue the tax audit report. Where are we ever saying whether accounting standard needs to be followed? Where are we issuing a formal audit report as per SA 700? So we might assume that accounting standard need not be followed. That is where I want to draw your attention, friend. In the tax audit Form 3CA or 3CB audit report, we issue something called as a true and fair view, true and correct opinion. The minute an auditor says a set of data or financials are true and correct, it is assumed that accounting standards have been complied with. This has also been clarified by the ICAI way back in 1994 and through the guidance notes to tax audits, where it says it is mandatory for companies to apply accounting standards which form under Section 44AB. Therefore, this is a no-brainer. Automatically, if your client is going for tax audit, you have to follow your accounting standards. Now, another question comes. You issue true and correct, but for some reason, some accounting standards, as Chintan sir said, gratuity, you're not able to follow. Where do I need to mention it? Because when I issue my audit report under SA 700, I have detailed emphasis opinion, formation of opinion basis, where I have ample space to write that. Where will I do that in this tax audit report? There is a clause 3, which allows the auditor to report on observation, comments, or discrepancies. So this is one area where you can upload these issues. Or when you attach annexures under other reports, you can attach your detailed audit report. So please keep in mind, friends, as soon as 44AB becomes applicable, whatever audit you are doing for a company will completely follow through for this also. Now, next question. Tax audit, we are clear. What about a non-tax audit SEC? Do I still need to worry? Because in tax audit, you are right. I tell the income tax department that it's true and correct. So automatically accounting standards become applicable. That is where two aspects indirectly impute responsibility on auditor. First one being, while discharging your attest function as an auditor of the company, you have to ensure that accounting standards are implemented. This is clearly there in the preface to Statement of Accounting Standards in 1979 by the Institute itself. Thus, let us take a scenario where the street vendor that I first said, you file his return, he needs to get some loan because of COVID, he's suffering, he wants to get some money. The first question a banker is going to ask is, show me your balance sheet. I need to see your asset and financial health. So automatically he's going to blindly give that balance sheet that you as an auditor gave him and where your sign is going to be there. So by virtue of attesting that financial, you need to follow the accounting standards before you give it to him. Now let us take the next and most common scenario where you do not do any attest function. Your client is not asking you to issue any report for a loan. You have not handed it over to him, any sign. So does this mean you are free of worry? I've covered attest function, I've covered tax audit. The third chunk, you are free of worry. Whether you follow accounting or not, if the review board picks up, you need to worry. Unfortunately not. Again, friends, the ICAI has made it amply clear. In fact, this is brilliant. Many portions. There's so much clarity on what is expected out of an auditor as issued by the ICAI. That is where the code of ethics you need to consider. Part 1 of second schedule, 3 very important clauses, clause 5, clause 6 and 7, where it says, if an auditor fails to disclose material fact known but not disclosed, if an auditor does not disclose a material misstatement known to him to appear in the financial statements, want to stop you there. Now, these are more generic. Where is it even saying that accounting standards or auditing standards need to be followed? We need to draw reference to SA 320, Standards of Auditing, where it says, non-compliance with accounting standard is a material misstatement in materiality in planning and performing an audit. Therefore, in clause 6, it says material misstatement. SA 320 says non-compliance with accounting standards. Thus, we can presume that by virtue of doing a person's tax returns, by virtue of accepting anything as an auditor in professional capacity, whether or not an audit is mandatory, whether or not you're giving an attest function, whether or not you're filing the tax audit report, you are still responsible, you are still bound by the guidelines of the ICAI, which has not come out today. It has come out way back, 1979, 1991, 1988. And in the event where you are found guilty, the punishment can be up to 5 lakhs. They can remove you permanently if it is a material and a negligent, gross negligence that has come out. Thus, we have understood why today's topic is important, why us as professionals need to understand it. Now, you might ask me a very simple question. All that you have said has been, you yourself said it's 1979, 1999. Why is it suddenly important in 2021? The reason being, we now have a regulatory authority who actively will be looking into this, your Taxation Audit Quality Review Board. Now, in the past, as I already said, the disciplinary committee or other review standards, it was felt that they need to look at larger companies to protect the stakeholders and public interest. But today, even the non-company entities are dealing so much with public, either in the form of bank loans, in the form of defaults, in the form of deposits, in whatever form. Thus, At the right time, this has come out, especially during times of COVID or other disasters. It might be easier for you to not comply with the standard. So by virtue of setting a regulatory authority to now monitor this, us as auditors have to be aware of what these standards are, what needs to be complied with, and also ensure it has been kept in place. Now, the next logical question is going to be, there's some worry in some of the branches that I spoke to. All this while, we have formed a T-shaped balance sheet. We have not really looked into the formatting. Now, suddenly we have realized, okay, ICAI might ask us, does this mean we have to prepare it in as per Schedule 3 format? Does it mean we have to look at how the companies are preparing? The answer is absolutely not, my friends. Whatever you have done all these years is still correct. You can continue. There's more of a substance over form. Virtually itself, we would have, without knowing, followed the accounting principles because it has been ingrained to us in many ways. But now we need to ensure we disclose correctly, we provide the right clarifications, and in the places where we do not follow, we have to report the same to insulate us from the risk that could possibly arise. The one aspect you need to keep in mind, whatever format you prepare your balance sheet or profit and loss, it is acceptable. But we are sure that Accounting Standard 5 clearly says you have to distinguish between ordinary activities, extraordinary activities, change in policy prior period. So please ensure when you have these components in your profit and loss account, you specifically mention it in compliance with the accounting standard. So definitely follow a substance over form approach. The second aspect, whether an LLP, is it going to be considered as a non-company entity or is it a corporate entity? Now, Section 3 of the LLP Act clearly distinguishes LLP to be a body corporate incorporated under the LLP Act. So we can impute that it is considered as a company for the purpose as per the LLP Act, and the accounting standards as issued by the ASB of the ICAI will definitely be applicable to LLPs too. So as we can see, every entity, whether company, non-company, it's going to come into this bracket. But the question here is, why is there a distinction? For that, we can just directly say Section 135 of the Companies Act is going to be applicable for everybody. That is where the role of the institute has been phenomenal, my friends. What are these accounting standards that are going to be applicable? Now we know over 43 years this accounting standards board has been in place. In 2003, we had the correct there's some revision on the applicability in line with the tax audit. After 17 years today, we see another revision in line for two reasons. One, they've changed the definition in line with the MSME Act. The only difference is for MSME, it looks into investment in plant and machinery, but we have kept it to turnover and borrowings so that it is in line with our other parameters, such as issuing of CARO report or any audit report is on the base of turnover and borrowings. Second aspect is, it is to give some relief. Now I said, when they are making a distinction, the accounting standard board, they're giving relief along with it to your level 3, level 4, and level 2 entities, which we are going to understand through this. Now, as we are aware, ICAI is the only standard setter for accounting standards, holds a primary supremacy over it. What you have NFRA in the Companies Act, this is more, let us take a scenario where tomorrow the government devalues. The government can decide that this devaluation has to be capitalized. So that's exceptional criteria, the government has power. But for setting the standard, the principle is governed by ICAI, and hence this automatically says every professional, you and me, are governed by the provision of ICAI and hence by the provision of the accounting standards. In fact, you do not have to take professional indemnity insurance. You do not have to approach United India and all that. Your accounting standard is the biggest insurance that you have as an auditor in terms of attesting any record. So this has come in the welcome direction of this, what ICAI has done in 2021, the distinctions that they've very clearly given. Let us understand what these distinctions are. They've split all entities which are non-company into 4 levels. The first level has turnover less than 250 crores, borrowing less than 50 crores. Now these level 1 are generally considered to be larger entities. So it might not fall into our 96% bucket. By virtue of it being a larger entity, all accounting standards, all 27 accounting standards will apply to these entities. Along with these 2 criteria, if a company is in the process of listing its security or has listed its security, whether in India or outside India, please see the word security. It will include both equity as well as debt. automatically whether turnover exceeds 250 crores or not, it will form under level 1. Your bank, financial institution, insurance companies all form under level 1. So as we can see, level 1 is a standard entity. It's a larger entities. We will not be looking in depth into level 1 entities because whatever you follow for a company automatically is going to be applicable for a level 1 entity. Our focus is going to be on the last 3. It's going to be level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 2, turnover more than 50 crores, up to 250 crores, borrowing 10 crores, 50 crores. So if you see your friends, turnover means only the revenue. It does not include your other income such as interest, whatever does not pertain to your business or the GST. So that is how you take the definition of turnover. Second is borrowings will include any borrowing, whether you've taken from a related party, whether you've taken from a bank, whether you've taken from the partner of the firm, all of it is included in the borrowing. And at any point of time during this, you cannot just see the latest, but at any point. Holding and subsidiary of any of the above. So I'm sure we are all aware of these numbers. So I'm not going to be reading them out. But what you need to remember is the words commercial, industrial, or business. So any commercial, industrial business with these turnover criteria will automatically be applicable for level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4. What is interesting to note is this level 4. They've defined what falls under level 4, which is a residuary clause and includes every entity that is not covered. So any entity which is not a company will necessarily fall into these levels, which is why we as auditors have to understand in depth about the provisions that have come out through the ICAI. This is just a snapshot of what we already discussed. I'll just touch upon level 4, which says turnover less than 10 crores, borrowing less than 2 crores. Another brilliant thought, turnover less than 10 crores is being in line with your tax audit. So automatically we can say whatever entity for whom tax audit is not going to be applicable, because we are aware this year the limit has been increased, will fall under level 4, which is also going to be the primal discussion of our aspect. Now there are some disclosure exemptions given, some standards which are not even going to be applicable for the 3 levels that we are going to be discussing in depth. And generally these are called large, medium, micro, and small entities. For whichever company for whom Ind AS is applicable, supposing you are a LLP, now you have a holding for which Ind AS is applicable, then automatically as per provision of Ind AS, the subsidiary, joint venture, associates also provisions of Ind AS will be applicable. Thereby these entities will not form under any of the levels because automatically you are following the provisions of Ind AS. This is mostly for larger entities, your net worth more than 500 crores, if NBFC's net worth more than 250 crores. So I think this is just a point for us to note and understand if the entity which we have taken is going to fall into this bracket or not. What about charitable trust? Now I've said any entity which is a non-company will fall under these levels. Let us take a scenario. Charitable trust is a non-company entity. We prepare a very different income and expenditure statement for it based on donations. So typically we might not follow all of the accounting standards or what AS5 requires. Have you qualified the report so far? Because as I said, all along accounting standards are applicable. Now that is where the clarity of this notification needs to be appreciated, where they very clearly said commercial, industrial, or business. When we look at a charitable trust, if it does not form part of commercial, industrial, or business purpose, then you need not follow the typical accounting standards applicable. However, let us take a very common scenario. You are running a temple for charity. You have a hall in the temple which you let out as a marriage hall and earn money from it. Automatically, there is some commercial or business element to it. Thereby, you cannot insulate yourself by not following these accounting standards. Accounting standards will become applicable in such a scenario for charitable trust also. So you need to look at the microscopic lens, whether this charitable trust has any activity which is commercial, business, or industrial. Now, there are divided views. Let us take a scenario where a trust is earning interest from the fixed deposits, whether that can be construed as a commercial activity. Now, in my view, it cannot. It is as just mobilizing your savings to earn some extra money. Automatically, that does not become a commercial or a business activity. But we need to wait for more clarifications in this regard. So far, you can take note that if it does not have any other revenue generating aspect, then you can still continue to prepare your accounts as you're preparing without looking into the accounting standards. Now, 2 basic questions. It practically will happen now that we have a revised criteria. Friends, please remember this revised criteria that we are discussing is applicable for March 31st, 2021 balance sheet itself. So the notification will come with prospective effect. There might be cases where an entity earlier would have been level 2. Now it is considered as a level 1. Now I've said whenever an entity comes into level 1, all accounting standards will be applicable to it. So do we need to worry? Do we need to restate the previous year figures as per accounting standard? Answer is no. However, in your notes to accounts, you need to mention specifically that the earlier year was prepared as if it was level 2 and current year as if it was level 1. That is how simplified this is. The next aspect, level 1 entity as we have seen today. Now earlier the criteria was 50 crores. Now it has increased to 250 crores, almost 5 times, which is in line with the growth in the industry. An entity earlier year it classified as level 1, it exceeded that 50 crores. Now this year, for whatever reason, it does not classify as level 1, but next year again it classifies. So whether for 1 year you can go back from level 1, go through the exemptions that I've given, or you need to continue as if it is level 1. The rule is very clear. It says for 2 consecutive years, the minute you are classifying an entity as a level 1 entity, for 2 consecutive years, you need to continue with it. And then if it still does not classify as a level 1 entity, then you can go back to a level 2 or level 3. So this will make a huge impact on the audit planning that we take. So my recommendation is whenever we do a non-entity, non-company audit, the first question for us would be how much turnover the client made, so that before you even enter and start preparing your tax returns or whatever it is that you need to do through the engagement, you are aware which level it falls under before you take a call. Why do you need to be aware? Now we know what levels are there. We know the audit responsibility. This is the most critical part that we need to understand. On the exemptions or what all aspects are given for disclosure requirements for these 3 different levels that we are discussing. As you can see in the screen, friends, your AS1, disclosure of accounting policy, AS2, valuation of inventory, AS4, contingencies event after balance sheet date, AS5, net profit, construction contracts, revenue recognition, government grants. These are basic standards which is going to be applicable to all entities, and rightly so. These are the bedrock on which you even recognize the revenue, you even check the expenses or what policy an entity should follow. Thus, whether you're going to be level 1, level 2, level 3, whether you even earn 50 rupees as your turnover, automatically these standards are going to be applicable to you. Now, friends, I'm not going to tell you what is AS1, AS2, because I think this is something that every CA is privy to. What we are going to discuss today, because of these exemptions, how do we stand to benefit? What are some practical aspects by not applying accounting standards blindly? We just issue the tax report or the tax computation. What we as auditors need to keep in mind on future liability against us on not being followed. Now, cash flow is definitely not going to be applicable for 2, 3, 4 because it's found to be a cumbersome procedure to do that. Your property, plant and equipment, effects of foreign exchange. For level 3 and level 4, it is given some exemptions in terms of disclosure. Now, whenever we read disclosure exemption, what we need to remember is the entire standard and principles will still be applicable. What they have exempted is what in your notes to accounts, you need not give these disclosure requirements. Whatever is not applicable means accounting standard is not even going to be featuring into it, which is going to be your cash flow, your amalgamation, your segment reporting, and your earning per share. Now, naturally, logically, earning per share is only for companies who have share capital. So automatically that standard is not there. Discontinuing operations, certain other standards which we see are not likely to affect the enterprise at all. But largely when we see what is going to be applicable for a client and not applicable, it has been given in a very logical manner. And they've exempt a lot of disclosure requirement and fact finding. In fact, AS15, some measurement criteria is also exempt, which we will be discussing in detail. So what ICAI has done through this notification is they've simplified the work of an auditor. At the same time, they've emphasized the importance of preparation in accordance with these standards. So now we can safely conclude whatever ITR you're filing, whatever report you're issuing, anything you even sign, you have to ensure the compliance with these standards. Even though you're a level 4 entity, even though you're a small entity, what you see on the screen here, friends, the accounting standards will still be applicable to you to the extent it's practicable. Now, if you see your interim financials, is not applicable because you are not going to prepare quarterly financial statement for a client you are filing just your tax reports for, or just that income tax computation. But all the other standards which logically affect any enterprise becomes applicable to you subject to disclosure exemption. Thus, this table is important for you from the angle of issuing your notes to accounts, wherein whatever disclosure is exempt, you do not have to comment on it. But your basis of preparation still holds good. So what we see on the screen here is just a summary, a snapshot of the different standards that are applicable, exempt on a level-wise basis, just for a quick reference. I've also shared this PPT, which can be circulated and reviewed at a later time. One common aspect. Now that we are aware of that accounting standard 1 is going to be applicable for everybody. Let us take a scenario, partnership firm, a professional, in fact, even CS. We follow cash system of accounting. As we are all aware, your AS1 clearly says accrual to be one of the fundamental accounting assumptions, right? So, but multiple years, whether for doctors, whether for CS or lawyers, we have been following cash system of accounting. So the question here is, have we been doing a mistake by not complying with the accounting standards? Now, that is where I want to draw your attention to section 145 of the IT Act, which recognizes cash or accrual method, and you are also allowed to opt for it in your 3CB. So wherever there is no statute which says you have to follow through accrual, like in the case of Companies Act, you need to follow accrual accounting. For non-entities, you follow cash accounting, that is okay. But what you have neglected as an auditor is, for those clients for whom you're doing cash accounting, you are okay to file that return of income, but you need to clearly mention in the emphasis of matter, whether in your audit report as SA 700 or in the Form 3C or 3CB, those options I showed you, clause 3 and clause 5, you need to clearly say that that client has followed cash basis of accounting. I'm not sure how many of us are doing this, but this is definitely a noteworthy aspect to insulate you from any issue that can arise later wherein you have not been complied with. Now, in the event where the statute says you need to follow only accrual, in those cases, the auditor has to issue a qualified report. So this is the implication, friends. Now, we will know for a fact that AS1 has accrual as one of the fundamental accounts, but how many of us are connecting the dots? How many of us are showing in the tax audit report that this has not been complied with? That is how critical it is to be aware of the applicability of these standards. Let us take another scenario, and this is a question I've had very often from some clients, where they want to shift from SLM to WDV basis, whether this is going to be a retrospective amendment, whether it's a change in accounting policy. Again, para 63 of AS1 very amply clarifies that change in method of depreciation is only a change in accounting estimate. It is not a change in accounting policy, and it only needs to have a prospective amendment. So thereby, you do not need to mention it specifically in the notes to accounts of the change. It is good to give the information, but only as a change in estimate, and you need not adjust anything to the reserves and surplus. As I already said, when we went through the accounting standards, the core concern for us today is going to be able to understand what are the disclosure exemptions that are given for level 3 and level 4. Now, AS10 has some exemptions, AS11 and AS26. AS10 says your carrying amount of temporary or idle PP, gross carrying amount of fully depreciated PP, or PP retired from active use. So please remember, you still need to give your FA schedule that is required to be given. What you need not give is for idle assets or assets that are fully depreciated. Now, these were recommended disclosures as per AS10. Now they've said for level 3, level 4, owing to the size, it is okay if you do not disclose this. Similarly, for AS11, disclosure with reference to your foreign country risk management policy. Now, if a level 3, level 4 entity has a forex transaction, you still need to follow provisions of AS11. What you need not do is give this disclosure on the policy or with respect to impairment on fully amortized asset or impairment recognized or reversed in P&L. So whenever we have impairment, we show a movement. Now, what is recognized in P&L, what is fully amortized, that you are exempt from giving. Let us take AS10, some very common issues that we face. Now, your plant might not be working for a period of 2 months. A lot of us are on lockdown, similar to your clients who would have to shut the factory. A question that I hear is, Can we avoid charging depreciation? I was not using the asset for 2 months. My factory was shut down. There is no sale. Can I avoid depreciation? AS10 very, very clearly says depreciation already, as you've considered wear and tear, technological obsolescence, and flux of time, which means whatever that number of years you've taken for your depreciation already has taken into effect these factors. So your lockdown has already been considered while arriving at the 10-year or 5-year period. Therefore, you cannot not expense depreciation. The minute you put it to use as per the provisions of Income Tax Act Section 32, automatically you have to compute depreciation every day, whether or not at a future date there is a lockdown or the machinery is not working. Second question. Now you've said I have to take depreciation. Okay, I will recognize depreciation. But can I show it as an exceptional expense because it did not pertain to my business? Again, friends, depreciation is an ordinary expense. What has become exceptional is the reason to earn revenue or some overhaul costs. What is regular is still the asset functioning and the depreciation on it. Thus, by virtue of lockdown, you cannot take this stand. That is where you need to refer to the provisions of accounting standards. So every decision we need to make during the course of our audit or issuing tax audit or even filing a return, it is clearly already given in the standards on what basis you are taking that. There are some more additional disclosure exemptions that have been given to your level 2, level 3 and level 4 entities. One is AS13, where it says disclosures as required by specific statute is not required for your level 4 entity. Your AS15, now I want to spend some time on this, so I'm going to not read out these aspects. Then your AS19, where you do not need to disclose your gross investment less unearned income, minimum lease payment, because it was felt that this will involve more computation and time from the auditor to do that. And for smaller entities, it is okay. The extent of contracts and materiality is going to be lesser. Similarly, for your AS29, which deals with provision and contingencies, reconciliation of opening and end of your provision, you do not have to give the breakup. While you still need to follow the standards and issue that in your balance sheet, you do not have to give a detailed breakup in your notes to accounts. With that, let us discuss the specific exemptions given to AS15. And I want to reiterate why this is important. Now, most of the other disclosure exemptions are only in the nature of us not needing to show that in the notes to accounts. But in AS15, the recognition and measurement itself has been touched to, and which is why we need to learn. Two areas. One is going to be your leave encashment. The other is going to be your post-employment benefit. Now we are aware whenever there is leave encashment, there are two aspects of it. Say you are a non-company entity, you allow your employees to take 30 leaves a year, and you tell them, don't worry, if you do not avail it, again next year you can carry forward 10 days and you can avail it. So let us take a scenario where this year, after all these leaves that is allowed, 300 working days, your employee is earning 5,000 rupees. Now next year, he would have worked 310 days because this year he is not availing that leave because already worked from home, so he does not need that leave. Now next year, he decides to travel with his family. He takes this 10 days extra that you have given him. So for 290 days, he's still earning the same 5,000 rupees. So this is where you need to understand there's some complexity where the company is allowing the employee to carry forward that leave at a later date. You need to compute the time value of money, which is why the requirement for an actuarial valuation becomes very relevant. Now, I'm sure, including myself, we do not spend enough time on this standard to understand the applicability, but these are very common policies that non-company entities adopt, where in order to retain their employees, they never give a short term. What is short term leave? Where it says, if you do not avail in 12 months, it is lapsed. If you do not take this, you won't get paid. So if it's a short term within the same year, it says nothing to worry. But typically, friends, whenever I look at a non-company entity, leave is something they're very negligent of in terms of compliance with AS15, where they have complex provisions. Now, in one case where they say it is vesting. Now, let us take a scenario that same 10 days, if you don't avail, after 2 years, I will pay that to you in cash. So automatically you're complicating further, where you're not just allowing him to carry forward the leave balance, but you're saying he can take a benefit in cash for all the leaves that he has not availed. Now, as a non-company, you do not know when your employee is going to withdraw that cash. It can be after 2 years, or if he's quitting after 3 years, he can take that. So all this will require some complex aspects to understand the liability of the company today. So please keep in mind, whenever you are allowing a long-term leave encashment policy, whether in terms of carrying forward your leave number of days, when you carry forward the number of days, the example that I said, it will come under non-vesting. When you say, I will give you cash, you don't have to avail that leave ever. I will give it to you in cash, then it will come as a vesting. So as you can see on the screen, whenever it's vesting, actuarial valuation is mandatory. Whenever it's non-vesting, one benefit has been given to your level 2, level 3, and level 4, even though you're allowing them to carry forward the number of days, even though it's going to be a complex accounting between your 290 days, 310 days, and 320 days, you do not need to get your actuarial valuation. So the first question you need to ask for AS15 is not your payroll data, TDS data, but you need to check with the client with this. So every time I notice after the audit is over, we raise this point of actuarial valuation. By then the client is very tired. So he will say, I'll get it for you, sir, next year, and that next year never comes. So whether it's a company or a non-company, you cannot escape the provisions of actuarial valuation. The next aspect with AS15, which is complex in my view, is going to be a defined contribution, defined benefit plan. Now, defined contribution plan, very clear, is going to be your PF, ESI, and all the other aspects. You just deposit on a monthly basis, be done with it, account for it, and finish. The second aspect, your defined benefit, which will be in the nature of gratuity and pension very commonly. Now, we might think that the minute an enterprise has an employee working for more than 5 years, having more than 10 employees, provisions of gratuity will become applicable. So more likely than not, this provision is going to be applicable for every entity, whether company or a non-company. Again, with gratuity, we grapple with the same issue, wherein you have to contribute every year. If you take a fund, you will give the fund some money every year. And at the end of the termination of employment of the employee or retirement, a bulk amount needs to be paid. Now, during this process, we as CAs are not equipped to compute what you have to pay after 20 years, what is the time value, what is the discounting, which is why the standard very clearly says you need to get an actuarial valuation done for your defined benefit plans. What is the relief given by ICAI? Good relief for every level 4 entity where your turnover is less than 10 crore, borrowing less than 2 crore. You do not need to worry about this at all. Very, very good amendment in my view, because when you are a small entity, to just sustain your business is going to be a struggle. So to incur costs on an actuary to get that done to satisfy your auditor is going to be difficult. So that is completely eliminated. For the level 2 and level 3 friends, this is why you need to remember your question should not alone be what is the leave policy, but there should be a counter question to ask what are the number of employees that are there in your company. More likely than not, many entities, level 2 and level 3, have more than 50 employees. The minute they have even 51 employees, you have to insist on them to get this actuarial valuation. Please note, if they do not get it, the liability is going to be high. But in the event where it is less than 50 employees, again, the good news is they need not worry about actual valuation, whether applicable or not, whether the employees that encashes it, whether they have a policy for it. So your true criteria is going to be the employees, number of employees, and the policy that the company is following. Generally, the actuary will give it to you in projected unit cost method. This is very specific to what they give. The minute you get this valuation, you just need to account for that liability and move ahead with your balance sheet. Now, I had a very interesting question that came in where it said, a partnership firm takes group policy from LIC. Payments the firm is making directly to LIC. Now, why do I need to worry about actual valuation? I already have a fund. So that is where you need to remember, even though your firm has signed up with an LIC company, the activity of a LIC company is that of a fund manager. What happens is, let us say you give him 100 rupees every year. Over a period of 5 years, it becomes 500 rupees. Then there is some interest, time value of money, another 200 gets added. Total fund with him is 700. Top management in your company resigns, wants to withdraw the gratuity. He needs 1000 rupees as per the computation for gratuity. Now, LIC is not going to bear that loss of 300 rupees. It is going to come back to the firm and say, listen, whatever fund you have given me, I have paid in full. Now you need to make do with the loss and settle your employee. That is not on him. Thereby, even though your firm, even though the non-entity has a fund with LIC, it does not absolve either the client or the auditor from complying with the provisions of AS15. Actual valuation is a must, my friends. Whenever you have these criteria that you have satisfied, over and above the exemptions that we just discussed, what happens? You have told the client, applicable, 52 employees becomes applicable. Now, most of the smaller clients might have many employees based on the nature of their business. Client has not given you. He said, I will give, you waited, but as of date, when you file the return, client has not given you. What should you do? You need to qualify the audit report. Whenever any accounting standard is not being followed, but being enforced on the entity, it is a duty of the auditor to qualify the report and draw attention to the users of that report. So whether tax are going to be applicable to you or not, you still need to find a way to qualify that report and mention this in your audit paragraph. Certain other standards which are less likely to apply is going to be AS 21, 23, 25, 27, pertaining to consolidated statement, interim statements, associate, joint venture. Now the assumption is whenever you're a smaller entity, you entering into these arrangements is going to be lesser. So these standards will not be applicable to the extent that you do not enter into it. Now what do I mean this last caveat where I say only if entity is required or elects to prepare, it needs to get follow these standards. Let us take a very simple scenario. An individual who has a property, he enters into a joint development agreement. Automatically provisions of joint development will become applicable to this individual. So whenever you have these specific transactions which will indicate the requirement to apply the standard, these less likely standards will become applicable. Otherwise, you do not need to worry. You do not even need to disclose in the notes that this standard is not applicable or draw any reference to it as long as it does not apply to your client. Level 4, over and above all these exemptions that we just discussed, has further exemptions allotted to it. If you take AS 14, only if the level 4 entity enters into an amalgamation, it needs to follow. AS 27, as I already said, only when there are joint operations, you need to worry. And AS 22. Now, in my view, this AS 22 is a critical change that has come in, where it says AS 22, we are aware is a taxation and deferred taxation standard, where it says current tax only is applicable for level 4, which automatically means your deferred tax is not going to be applicable. Now, let us take a scenario. Up to last year, you have been very diligently auditing a non-company entity. You've recognized this deferred tax. This year, your entity automatically falls into this level 4 bucket, wherein the institute has given you a relief and said, don't bother computing deferred tax. Now, in this scenario, as an auditor, your job is even further made simplified, where they've said your deferred tax only whatever opening balance is there, you just need to adjust it against the reserves. You do not need to worry further on what you need to do. Just adjust the opening balance to your revenue reserves and prospectively only take your current tax and do not worry about deferred tax. So I want to take a quick minute to explain these provisions of deferred tax. Just like how we view AS 15 as a very complicated standard, I noticed more professionals move away from the deferred tax. Just hearing the word makes their head a little dizzy and they do not want to follow it. But the provisions in effect are very simple. And please keep in mind, friends, now that the institute has very clearly given us a mandate on what is applicable and not applicable, the minute your client does not fall as a level 4 entity, you will mandatorily need to recognize in your balance sheet this deferred tax provision. Typically, let us take a scenario, profit is going to be 100 rupees. Now, this is profit as per your books, which you have done following your accounting standards. There are certain exemptions and available to your Income Tax Act. Changes in depreciation. We are aware that Income Tax has a different format, Companies Act has a different format. So you need to automatically adjust these changes when you prepare your income tax return. Finally, after the additions, disallowances, allowances, you come out with a taxable income of 60 rupees. Now, what we focus on for the purpose of deferred tax is that 40 rupees, which is going to be the difference between your gross total income as per your income tax computation and your profit before tax. Whatever is that difference is something you need to have a separate work paper for to understand this difference further. Now, what do I mean by understanding this difference further? This 40 you further split as permanent and temporary differences. Now, let us take a scenario where you've got dividend and you take it as a separate aspect. This is exempt as per provisions of Income Tax Act, which is going to be a permanent difference. All the other aspects is only a temporary difference. Now, when you have depreciation, it is going to come as a temporary difference because today you have a higher rate as per Income Tax Act, lower rate as per Companies Act, and over time that gap will get bridged over the period of time. So whatever is a temporary difference is where you need to recognize as deferred tax. So in my view, this is a very simple and straightforward standard. We abstain from commenting or using it for smaller clients. This policy has to change because Institute has made it amply clear that from 31/3/2021 balance sheet, all this needs to feature in your balance sheet. Now that we have understood the various accounting standards that are going to be applicable and not applicable, let us delve, in my view, the most important aspect of this presentation, which is going to be practically. Now, for many years, we are also aware of the standards. For many years, we have attended these sessions. But how are we practically going to get affected? Now, I've already said in one aspect where whenever you follow a cash system of accounting, you have to mandatory issue in your emphasis of matter paragraph that the company has followed cash system. Now, many clients immediately fear, especially the smaller clients. Sir, don't say that in the report. I have to go to the bank or follow loan. I think that is where you need to explain the provisions of SA 700 and keep them aware that even though your opinion is modified, it is not qualified or adverse. So it is only you disclosing as an auditor, you doing your duty in terms of requirement of the accounting standards. The most hotly debated topic and one aspect that comes in every notice that my clients get from the Income Tax Act is requiring us to disallow the contribution made by the employees to the Provident Fund, which is made after the due date. Now, let us first understand the basic clauses that get affected here. You have 36(1)(5)(a), which clearly says whatever contribution needs to be made to the Provident Fund or any statutory authority, if the same is not made within the due date as given in that act, the same needs to be disallowed. If it is done within the due date, you can allow it in your tax return. Now, let us take a scenario for the month of April. You need to pay PF by 7th. You need to generate the challan, and latest, as you show that as a deduction from the salary, and latest by 15th and plus 3 grace days. So, as per the PF Act, if you do not disclose by 15th of May that this payment has done, if you make the payment in June or July, then you need to disallow. So 36(1)(5)(a) is very clear. But when 43B clause 2 was issued, it said up to the date of filing a return of income, whatever the employer needs to discharge by virtue of these payments for the employees, they can, up to the date of filing return of income, if they make the payment, then you can still take that as an allowable item. So there has been a lot of uproar and controversies around this, because what happened is 43B completely clarified what you need to do from the employer angle. They did not speak about what employee contribution should do. So multiple courts took different views. For example, Gujarat High Court said in favor of Income Tax Department, they took a call and said, if the employee does not pay within the due date as prescribed in the statute, the employee contribution, you have to still disallow. Whereas Bombay High Court or even Madras High Court has ruled in favor of the SSC. And it said, even though you do not pay within the due date as per the statute, you can impute as a 43B, which is applicable for employees, will also be applicable for employee contribution, because net to net, it is the same transaction. Therefore, you can still go ahead and take that as a deduction. Now, since we do not have a Supreme Court ruling, what we as auditors have been doing all these years is, according to the jurisdiction we are in, supposing I'm in Chennai, supposing you are in Maharashtra, then you can say Bombay High Court has given in favor, Madras High Court has given in favor. So I'm going to proceed and claim that as a deduction, even though 36(1)(5)(a) does not allow it. Now, this is the next point, friends. Even though you adopted whatever stance you took, how many of us have reported in our audit opinion paragraph? Now, if you take in the case of Mumbai, you do not have to give any opinion, it is unmodified. But if you take in the case of Ahmedabad, you have to give a qualified opinion, because your jurisdiction High Court has not afforded or given benefit to it. So you need to qualify. What the management has taken call on allowability is different from the auditor disclosing his responsibility. Now let us take a scenario, if you are in Indore, then you can just give an emphasis of matter, because you are not bound by any jurisdiction. And we are all aware, whenever there are two contradicting High Court decisions, whatever is more beneficial for you, if it is not in your jurisdiction, you can take that. In my view, none of us even did this aspect for our clients all these years. But now in 2021, the finance minister has made it amply clear and put these issues to rest by saying, for removal of doubts, it's hereby clarified that provisions of section 43B shall not apply and shall deem never to have been applied for the purpose of determining due date under this clause. So when we said you can take due date as per 139 or due date as per statute, there were some changes. Now they've come out and said this. And this is applicable from 1st April 2021. There are two gray areas in this. One, when you finalize for 31/3/21, you have no option but to disallow whatever delay is there on your employee's contribution to Provident Fund. Your employer contribution still holds good. Even though there's a delay, if it is paid before return filing, you can take it under 43B. But in the event where this is not followed, as an auditor, you have to issue a qualified opinion in your Form 3CA 3CB report or attach it as an other report. This is mandatory. You can no longer take a stance of unmodified or emphasis of matter. The second aspect which we need to await clarification from. First, they say that Finance Act 2021 says it's applicable from April 1st, 2021. The second thing it says, when you read the wording, it says shall deemed never to have been applied, which means it can be imputed as if this is a retrospective amendment. Therefore, many of us would have gone on CIT appeals, disputing and referencing to the High Court decisions in favor of our order. This might be a game changer for that. So it is time for us to work back, reassess the materiality. If a client is going to hugely be harmed by these decisions, then it is worth fighting for quoting these two anomalies that we just went through. But if it is a smaller amount, since there is a clarificatory amendment that has come out with words such as deemed never to have been applied, in my view, it is a lost battle and can be finished with. The second practical issue is going to be in the area of 269 section itself. Now, this is a very detailed section posing a lot of responsibility on the auditor, especially where you need to give your remarks on the tax audit report on applicability and all that. Now, all this while we give a very standard line for bigger entities and say we were not able to go in depth and check every voucher, so we are not sure of 269S's applicability. How many of us are checking the journal entries? So that is where I want to discuss two important case laws that have come in. One is in the case of CIT versus Worldwide Trade Township Project, where there was a third party, PACL, which purchased lands on behalf of Worldwide Township. So what Worldwide Township did was a real estate developer. It created asset, that land, and credited this third party as a loan payable to the party. The assessing officer came out and said, since you have done this as a journal entry, I am assuming that you have accepted a loan otherwise than by way of account pay check or account pay bank draft. Because how your PACL did was, it took a demand draft and gave it to the bank. So the assessing officer imputed this. Thankfully, there was a favorable decision by the Delhi High Court in this regard. So just because they did this whole transaction, they considered it as not to fall under your 269SS. Now, the second case law, which is more staggering, is there's a scenario where the loan payable and they also made sale to the same party. So they netted off this receivable and payable and only showed the net balance. Now, the Bombay High Court came out and said, in Triumph International said, since you have netted it off by virtue of a journal entry, the loan is paid otherwise than by way of account pay check or account pay draft. And believe it, my friends, the court ruled against the SEC and said 2690 is applicable. Why did the auditor not disclose in the audit report? Now, these two scenarios might be a little far-fetched for our smaller entities that we'll be taking. Let us take a simple scenario. You are a partner of a firm. You are traveling abroad. Now, we know as a partner of a firm, your credit card and the firm's credit card is the same in your wallet. You want to purchase an iPad for yourself, 40,000 rupees. So you just swipe the firm's credit card because you're not able to find your credit card. You just swipe the firm's credit card and buy this iPad for yourself. Now, what the firm will do, it will pass a journal entry to this effect. Whether you need to disclose this in your tax audit report. The answer is yes. If you very strictly read the provision of 2690, And the guidance note given by ICAI, where it says 2690 says repay money to the person from whom loan is borrowed. Otherwise, you report. So in this scenario, you are not repaying to the person from whom it was borrowed, so you need to report. Second, the clarification that has come out, loans and deposits taken or accepted by means of transfer entries in books of account constitute acceptance of deposit or loan otherwise than by way of account payee check. Thus, your responsibility as an auditor of this firm will be to disclose this. Whether they will take penalty 270 or whether they will impose this clause is not under your criteria, but it is the duty of the auditor to comply with these provisions. There are some creative questions that have come out where whether whatever loss I've made during Corona era, it is not because of my business, it is beyond my control. Can I create an asset? Can I capitalize it since it is not normal course of business? Or even if I take it in my profit and loss account for the purpose of income tax, can I not consider it as an expense? Now, all these questions have been put to rest. The institute has given over 7 advisories over this period of time, wherein all this you cannot recognize. Definitely, as an auditor, now that we have understood the impact of accounting standards, it is also important for us to remember the auditing standards that guide how we do any audit or issue any report. Going concern is one area which is significantly going to affect the manner of audit that you are doing this year. Many entities have been, for whatever reason, unfortunately, struck by this era where their regular businesses are not there, where they're not able to complete their orders, they're not able to receive the orders. So you need to go into the auditor's shoes and ensure that going concern still holds good, take adequate management representation, have adequate documentation that you have complied with the provisions of SA 570, and have a separate docket as to impact of COVID after the reporting date. Some indicative aspects you can consider is financial matters, whether there is a loan that is repayable, the client is not able to pay back loans, repaid creditors, borrowings, whether they've not adhered to covenants of the borrowing clauses, operating aspects, shortages of imported supplies, management intentions to liquidate the entity. So these are softer aspects that you need to understand by asking the pertinent questions, taking the support of senior professionals to ensure that for every client, small or big, you are assessing the aspect of going concern. So whether you are auditing a company or a non-company, SAs are still going to be applicable for you. So doing this work on going concern becomes important. Now moving on to inventory. A very common scenario that is arising today is your client would have manufactured inventory based on a customer order understanding. Now in India, we are aware there are a lot of oral understanding on the basis of which you amp up your plant and you start. For whatever reason, the customer now does not want this stock. You have no legal validity, no recourse to enforce the sale to the customer. What will you do with the raw material? ICAI guidance has come to this effect where it says, whenever a stock is not saleable at all in the market, you have to immediately recognize that as a loss. But even though you're not able to sell it to that customer who placed the order, you're able to sell it to somebody else, then you need to assess cost or NRV, whichever is lower, rightly under provisions of AS2. Now, friends, Reliance, one of the largest entities, has recognized a loss of 4,000 crores this year by doing this cost versus NRV analysis. So every firm, every company audit, you have to check whether provisions of AS2 has been complied with. You need to have a relook into the inventory because we are aware there can be obsolescence. There is a reduction in price. The market is not doing well. So doing this analysis, keeping this work paper for your inventory is very important. Second is, your client could question you asking, they have shut down during COVID, like how losses, they said, whether this abnormal cost, now you might be paying higher amount for storing that inventory. You wouldn't have foreseen to have manufactured so much inventory that goes unsold. You could have taken an additional space. All this you cannot capitalize to the inventory. Inventory, bringing it to the current location and condition only forms part of cost of the inventory. Once it's already in that location, how you store or the abnormal cost has to be expensed only through your profit and loss account, including computation of your overheads. Only your overheads is always on a normal capacity basis, that you cannot factor in these idle periods, low production, all that will become a non-criteria for your inventory valuation. Naturally, we are not able to observe physical verification. In fact, frankly speaking, many auditors do not look into physical verification of non-company where they do not foresee a substantial inventory. But please remember, AS becomes applicable to you. Automatically, physical verification becomes mandatory for you. And SA 501 very, very clearly says, in the event where you're not able to observe the inventory count, you've not done alternate procedures to that effect due to non-observance, you need to modify your audit report and give a modified opinion. So it imposes a lot of responsibility on an auditor to comment on physical verification. We assume, okay, I'm not issuing CARO, I do not need to worry about it, but that is not the case. Before CARO, the standard setting bodies, be it your accounting standard, auditing standards, already deal with it. So in the event where you're not able to observe the physical verification, either use technology, do a video call with the client to check it, or do rollback procedures, go at a later date and do it, but definitely do not neglect. Especially when you have a retail client, typically a lot of sole proprietors become retailers, they'll have multiple stocks, multiple quantities, multiple godowns. It is still your responsibility to do that. For post-balance sheet date, as they are aware, owing to COVID, this also becomes significant along with your going concern. While going concern determines how you do your balance sheet till 31st March, this standard will deal with whether there are any indicators which make it certain that you need to assess for it after the balance sheet date to show on the balance sheet. We are aware the provisions of AS3. Now, some companies would have taken loans and opted for this moratorium scheme by the RBI. Now, RBI clearly gave them a comfort and said, this will not, just because you opt for moratorium, it will not be considered as if you are defaulting from that loan. But friends, you need to check the loan agreement. Now, many loan agreements will reclassify the loan where the debt covenants are violated. So there are ratios that will change because these repayments are not made. So either the client has to revise this loan agreement, or if the loan agreement carries that clause where failure, the debt covenants are breached, then you need to reclassify the loan, which will change the manner of your financial position of your client itself, small or big. So kindly ensure you check this at the time of closure. Again, the significance of AS9 is very paramount, where it says if you have uncertainty over collection, over ultimate collection, then you need not recognize the revenue immediately. The same can be postponed. This you definitely need to check for both 31/3/20, 31/3/21, and the periods forward. Based, your client would have recognized the revenue with an anxiety to show a better financial position, but you need to apply the provisions of AS9, check the recoverability of it, and then only take it forward in your profit and loss account. There are certain other components that we will see, be it your sales return, discounts, your liquidated damages. Now, the accounting standard 9 is very clear, which says whenever you have a sales return or discount, you need to net it off against your revenue. So some clients I notice, without being aware of these provisions, they will show it as purchases because it is in the nature of debit. So all this you have to ensure to show the correct profit and loss statement now that you are bound by this. So even if a client does 10 rupees, 20 rupees, whatever amount that business is, these provisions come into play. You also have some clients where they've extended. Now they'll give you loyalty points. They'll say, if today you purchase for 100 rupees, you'll get one more for free. So this is automatically complicated because what they're saying is today a person pays 100 rupees, they get one product and they can choose another product at a later date for free. So then your revenue recognition will also undergo a change. So whenever there is some creative aspects that your client incorporates into his sale process, please check the applicability of standards and accordingly do that. As I already said, whether you have your asset running or not, you cannot avoid recognizing depreciation. That is something that has to be recognized. Now, very logical question. Let us take a sole proprietor or a partner, smaller entity. Whether now we know in Companies Act, you follow different depreciation and that's why you have a deferred tax aspect. Now, whether for this person or a firm, whether your depreciation can be the same as income tax act. Now, I myself use only the income tax depreciation. There is no further complication. But this is where we need to stop, friends. You need to actually logically check. Now, AS10 determines your depreciation aspects. As we are aware, AS6 got merged into AS10. which clearly says depreciation to be a systematic allocation of depreciable amount of an asset over its useful life. Now, it is assumed that whenever income tax depreciation is there, this has been considered. But supposing your client buys a very peculiar asset or a very expensive asset, then you need to have either an internal analysis by the client giving you how the useful life is determined, or an external chartered engineer to give that. So this is more on specific basis where you find higher amounts of assets in the balance sheet to check the applicability of this standard. The next common question is capitalization of borrowing costs. Now we know that till the date an qualifying asset, that is an asset that takes a substantial period of time to come into play, till it is there, you can capitalize the borrowing cost. Now we are all aware during this period that many companies, many non-company entities have halted the production, have halted the process of capitalization. So during this period, this idle period, you cannot capitalize your borrowing cost. The AS60 very clearly says capitalization of interest is suspended during the period of non-operation. So during the periods where it is not in operation, you cannot recognize the borrowing cost. Another significant change with leases, now largely we do follow it, but two aspects I want to touch upon which are of relevance today. One is going to be a rent concession. Now you need to evaluate whether it is formed part of the agreement itself. The lessee has given a revised agreement with the lessor where you do not have to pay increased rent. Many cases we observe this. Immediately you can modify your liability. Now in the event where there is no agreement to that effect, you have to take the full expense as per the lease agreement in your rent operating expenses, and you need to show rent concession as other income. So checking the agreement becomes important in this respect. The second aspect, which has been here for a very long time, pertaining to a straight lining of rent, which typically is not being followed. Now, whenever we see a rent agreement, whether it is for one room, one factory, one office space, we see that it is for a period of 11 months. And there are certain increments that go year on year. There's a clause which will say 5% increment after 1 year, 10% increment after the second year. Now we generally see that clause, but whatever rent is there as per that agreement, we recognize that and move on. But please remember, friends, AS19 becomes applicable for all entities, including a level 4 entity. So in the event where, say you have to pay 5,000 rupees for 6 months, 6,000 rupees for the next 6 months, you need to recognize 5,500 rupees per month. This is called a straight lining, where you determine your entire liability that is there indicated in the agreement, and you recognize rent in the year 1 itself on a straight line basis. So this is something that is not being followed, which now becomes mandatory, because in the event where your QRB board is going to come and ask you, you need to disclose that you as an auditor ensure that the accounting standard has been followed. There are certain other aspects which I'm going to quickly touch upon before we conclude the session so that we have ample time to discuss. I see a lot of people have questions and raise their hands. So let me quickly finish these aspects. It is going to be in the area of deferred tax. Now, we notice a lot of companies, just because they're earning loss, immediately they recognize a deferred tax asset. But as an auditor, you need to ensure that there is virtual certainty. Now, let us take the case of startups. Let us take the case of Uber, where year on year, there is a loss being there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to recognize a deferred tax asset. The reason being, they are getting funded, and which is why they are surviving. They are not making it virtually certain that tomorrow they will earn profit. So many startups, the business model itself can be on the base of Uber, where they are getting funding by virtue of their idea and their functioning, they are proceeding, but you cannot recognize a deferred tax asset from it. As I already said, it is only going to be applicable for the larger level 2, level 3, and level 1 entities. If you are a level 4 entity, you need not worry. The last accounting standard, which is going to be important in this scenario, is going to be impairment. Now, we are aware that an entity generally does not have to look into impairment unless indicators of impairment exist as at balance sheet date. By very virtue of the times we are living in, unfortunately, we already have these impairment indicators, whether there's change in market, technological obsolescence, interest rate, evidence of poor economic performance, significant change. So this year, when you close any of the reports, impairment becomes applicable for you, whether you are a small entity or a large entity. Please keep in mind, when you look at this impairment, you are aware that the indicators already exist. What do you need to check is a recoverable amount. So whenever there are impairment indicators, you check whether the value in use or the net selling price, whichever is higher, you take that as a recoverable amount. You compare with the amount as at balance sheet date. Now, this might sound very complicated, which is why the institute has come out and said, if you are level 2, level 3 entity, don't worry. If you are level 4 entity, the standard itself won't apply. So what do we need to know for level 2 and level 3 entities with respect to impairment? I said, since indicators already exist, you need to have an understanding of the value in use, which is typically having a forecast of your future cash flows. You discount it, then you arrive at a value in use today. This was found to be a very complex exercise which involved time and a lot of auditors' angle. So they've come out and said, if you're a level 2 and level 3, impairment will still apply for you. But this recoverable amount, when you compute, you do not have to go through that pains of forecasting 5-year cash flow, going discount. Since you are a smaller entity, all you need to do is have an estimate of what your value is going to be in use, what your reasonable assumptions are. You do not need to have a complex working for it or go to a professional. And then you arrive at a recoverable amount. So in my view, AS 28 is important during this period. So please ensure for your clients, you have a work paper documented in this regard. The last aspect, of course, is going to be your AS 29. This is a standard that has always been applicable. Few aspects we need to see in the times that we live in. One is onerous contracts. Now, your client would have entered into a contract for, say, 150 rupees revenue with a costing of 120 rupees, and he would have said, okay, I make 30 rupees, so let me enter to the contract. Now, because of the time period and the changes that have come, his cost would have shot up to 170 rupees, wherein performing this contract itself will incur a loss to him. So more likely than not, these contracts might be dropped. So you need to specifically check with the client whether these things happened where they started a project, but they backed out in the last minute. Second is, we notice whenever there is an insurance policy, the minute the client submits the claim itself, he recognizes a contingent asset. So I want to stop you there. Please note, you recognize an asset only if it is certain. So unless there is communication from the insurance company telling you, yes, you will receive the claim at this point of time, that is when you recognize the asset, not before that. As I already said, there was some creative accounting where people asked, because of Corona, next year might be difficult, the year after that, so can I create a provision today for my future losses? Definitely not. It's absolutely prohibited as per provisions of AS 29. So unless you are certain, you cannot create the provisions. Now, subsequent to your accounting standard, from the tax audit point of view, or even your income tax filing point of view, whenever your client passes a bulk entry, he will, at the end of the month, he will pass a 30,000 rupee entry provisions. Now, as auditors, we are sometimes confused whether because he has created a provision, will TDS be applicable or not. The courts have very clearly ruled in this regard and said, whenever you have an ascertainable liability, you need to create provision correctly to that party. You ascertain the party, then TDS has to be deducted. But in the event you have unascertained liability. But friends, practically we are aware, very, very few clients have unascertained liability provisions. So please remember, whenever you deal with provisions, you immediately deal with aspects of TDS also. Because we are aware today that TDS forms a very important part during the course of income tax. The minute you file your return, the next question that comes is whether TDS has been complied with. Some other aspects are, now we are aware some companies opted for the PF contribution to be made by the government. When the government gave some relaxation from April to June 2020. So that is nothing but a government grant. So you need to apply provisions of AS 12 to apply for that and use the income approach. Now the other aspects are more softer issues that we need to consider as auditors. But with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. I once again thank WIRC for having such topics of relevance to help professionals deliberate on this and understand further on what needs to be done for non-company entities. Now with this, I would like to conclude and take some questions. I see 3 questions have come in. So I'll just quickly take that. Harshil has asked for presentation, which has already been shared with Harit, but you can also send an email to me, and I'm sure the branch chairman will help you assist this. Sounder has asked a question, using of actuarial services are not mandated by AS, only recognized by AS. In this case, how an entity can be mandated to get actual report? Also, para 49 of AS15 says it is a responsibility of the enterprise to measure the obligation under DBO. If the company is qualified actually as an employee or the management can do similar. So actually, will this be contradictory to 47? So again, a very well thought out question, Sounder. The guidance note has very clearly said that you need to have an actual valuation for the cases that I have informed. If you have more than 50 employees, irrespective of your size, unless you are not level 4, then you need to have actual valuation done. There is no specification where it says only an outside person needs to be done. So if it is a smaller entity, then actually is an employee qualified, and if you're able to get an independent report, you can do that. But in my view, it is advisable to always get this done through an outside professional. Employee data can be very confidential, and hence you will need to do that. The next question was depreciation on lockdown, which I think I've already addressed that. This can be found in your guidance given by the institute and advisory that has come from time to time. Very pertinent questions. Thank you for asking the same. And with that, I hand it over back to the chairman to take it forward. Do we have any other questions, sir?
Thank you. I think in case you would be having, we will be passing out to you. Thank you so much for your amazing session. Mohilji, if you can please propose a vote of thanks. Mohilji, you're there. I think there is some network issue. I think he's there. Yes. आप unmute कीजिए please. You need to unmute it. It was a wonderful session, Divya. We're just waiting for the audio connection. It's just getting मोहिल जी आप अनम्यूट कीजिए. I think there's some issue. Yeah, मोहिल जी आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही. I think there is some issue. We can. I think I'll take this honor of giving a vote of thanks. So yes, मोहिल जी आपकी आवाज आ रही है? हाँ, वॉल्यूम इंक्रीज कीजिए. You are now unmuted. You can now speak. Yeah. I think let me then just close it now. I think on behalf of all the members of Ahmedabad branch, Divya ji, thank you so much for amazing deliberation on a topic which is now, we were not much aware of it, but I'm sure members will be taking more, importance, giving more importance to this topic. Thanks to your deliberation, and we look forward to having you again and again at Ahmedabad branch, virtually now and maybe in future. Again, we see you to have physically at Ahmedabad branch. Thank you so much, Divya ji, for sparing your valuable time. We all are enlightened with your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.